introduce myself. My name is Mike Simmons. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Inflector Environmental Services. And we are happy to sponsor and introduce the From Chaos to Clarity, a practical approach of harnessing data for businesses improvement session. Your speaker for today's session is Chris Ovens, CEO and founder of ADO. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. All right. We have a little bit of participation here, so if you haven't had a chance, there will only be about 3 or 4 more chances before we have to do something. But Slido and the number and the QR code. I'm also joined by Jacob. He is going to be our live, what do we call it, live demo today. And you'll understand that as we go through. So just to get us kind of warmed up here, we'll see, I've got a high wire presentation taking place, so we'll see, get the energy up a little bit. Are we fired up? Are we fired up? Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah. Did that resonate with anybody? Is that, no? There might be different talks going on next door. And I got Mike here as well, so I'll get you to play along as we do this. So I'm Chris Ovens. And we have, as I mentioned, some participation taking place. So you can ask questions along the way. I see we have a couple. It is working. And who is this guy anyways? Okay. Well, I'm, as I was introduced, I'm Chris Ovens. I've worked a couple of decades in analytics. A couple of different areas, but that's essentially been most of my career in analytics. And then in 2016, I jumped into a large MEP contractor heading up technology and innovation. And then in 2019, set out to found ADO to really start to help construction companies harness data. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. I'm joined today by Jacob Splinter. Do you want to say a few words, Jacob? Or?
Sure, yeah. I'm Jacob Splinter, project manager, vice president of Great Bend Construction. So I'm kind of just an example working with ADO. We're a smaller general contracting company, just trying to grow our technology, use it properly. You guys have been great helping us do that.
Excellent. So I have purposely kept Jacob in the dark, and he is going to play along with me as I'm going to ask all of you to. This was designed to be a practical approach to go from chaos to clarity. And so practice means we do it. And so I'm going to ask you guys to follow along. You'll get a lot more out of this if you play along, and it'll be a lot more fun. So we're going to set up the objectives. We're going to look at a little case study outside the industry. Then we're going to actually work with what it looks like to harness data in your organization. And then I'm hoping people will share, just see what it looks like. So that's the path we're going down. The promise here was chaos to clarity. So we'll start. Who's not in a construction company? Okay, so a couple of. Okay, and then inside of construction, who's on operations? You guys, yes. Technology, and then finance. A couple of finance. Okay, yeah. Anything I missed or should have said? Excellent. Okay, so here's the promise. If you play along, we're going to see if we can find a game plan to unlock money in your company. And ideally, I'd like it to be more than 20, but we'll see where we get to. Does that make sense? All right. So, the video and a lot of talk around technology during the tech or the construction leadership panel talks a lot about tech adoption, lack of digitization, productivity, and there's this real dilemma, right? It seems like we should be doing more tech, but every time we try something, it's like we take 2 steps backwards, right? We fix one thing and it causes a problem somewhere else. Information that used to flow is not flowing, and it seems like you're damned if you do, and you're doomed if you don't. You just end up falling behind. And so the first thing we have to do is kind of change the perspective here, right? It's based on a faulty premise that more technology equals results, because it doesn't, right? Anytime we add something, it adds complexity. Now, I'm not saying technology is bad. I had a great conversation with Mike where he talked about how his organization is leveraging different types of technology to really move them forward and put them into a growth mode. And that's the point, right? The technology is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. So what we see is that when technology gets added to the mix, it adds complexity. And that complexity tends to show up in these types of problems. Either we're now spending more time moving data from point A to point B, manual data entry, and we're not getting the visibility that we hope for. We don't have the people to fix it, and so we don't get the results we were hoping for. Does that land? I see some head nods. And so we call that the quagmire. So if you're playing along, which of those 4 is the most present for you in your organizations? And I'll kick it over to you here, Jacob. What do you see when you look at those 4? So manual data entry, lack of visibility, IT resources, and then return on your technology investment. And have you here, Mike? I'll probably ask you too.
Yeah. For us, it was a lot of manual data entry, which is a huge time killer.
Yeah, go Mike probably.
Sorry, for a smaller company.
People are trying to do multiple roles, let's say, or I guess any size company. And manual data entry was really just killing everybody's time. You're trying to run multiple projects, do multiple things. So trying to streamline that.
Yeah. So you add technology and then you're spending your time moving things around.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Definitely is the manual data entry, and in my case, it would be poor operational visibility.
Yeah.
Was definitely two.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, it won't come as a shock that these are all connected, right? They go around in a loop, and so we're seeing that manual data entry not getting the results we hope for. That's 2 steps back, and then having the staff to do something better and just not getting improvement. So what we have to do here is essentially put technology in its place, right? It's not the objective, it's the means to the objective. And so it's not the business outcome, profit is, right? That's why we're doing this, is to try to improve operations to drive the bottom line. And that's what the session's really about. It's about harnessing data for expanded profits. So really, the new premise here is we have to stop working for our technology and get the data working for us. Okay? So I said we do a case study. You see, these are stock. It's a stock chart, essentially going from 2010 to 2020. There is about 6 companies there. People always answer so I'm going to get you to guess who's the red, who's the one that really outperformed. It's not Tesla. Now Tesla has even a steeper curve, but it essentially started from 0 over that decade. This company started from about $1.2 billion in revenue. So any guesses on who the company in red is? Google? It's a good guess. Apple? Amazon? Another good guess. Meta? Okay. Well, here's who they aren't. It's not Apple. It's not Facebook, Meta. It's not Google. There's a bit of a clue here because I got McDonald's and Chipotle up there. So it may surprise you that it's Domino's. Yeah. So Domino's was one of the best performing stocks over a decade, over from 2010 to 2020. And they started something in about 2008 that was their data-powered transformation. And they called it the pizza turnaround. Now, some of the older folks may remember they were not doing well, right? There was a lot of issues, a lot of complaints. Pizza tastes like cardboard, YouTube, all sorts of stuff. But they started a campaign on digitization. They called it the pizza turnaround, but very little was actually about making the pizza better. It was actually all around understanding their customers, right? How are their customers ordering? What are they ordering? Affinity, tracking. Like, they did some pretty amazing things back in that early time frame. And then doing it, so the view on the client was the business perspective. They made the data available, shareable and available internally so the organization could start to rally around it. In the first quarter they started this, they had a 14-point increase, same-store sales. So if you're familiar with QSR restaurants, that's possibly the largest increase ever, quarter over quarter, in terms of same-store sales. The CEO went on to say, we're as much a tech company as a pizza company. Now, I'm standing up here saying there's too much focus on tech, but as you unpack that, he was using technology for a purpose. And by the end of that decade, they had passed Pizza Hut as the #1 online seller of pizza. Essentially, they owned the market. Pretty fascinating story. Okay, why am I telling you this, right? Pizza and construction, right? Like it's apples and potatoes or something. Well, until you start to look at it and see, well, there's remote and distributed workforces, and it's essentially a commodity product. And it's physical labor, and there's quality standards, and there's training, and there's health and safety, and there's, right? So you start to look, and there are some really interesting parallels in the story. And then you look at, okay, what happened? Well, they had double-digit sales growth. Their revenue went up over that decade by 2.5 times. Profit was a big exponential on top of that, and then their stock price, as we saw, was a 90x. Partway through the decade, half of their corporate staff, 50%, worked on data. And that's the opportunity. But the first quarter, they didn't, and that's when they had their first big delta. So I'm telling two stories here. I'm telling a decade of improvements, and then I'm telling another story that is what you could do right now. And so with that, I want to move into the right now. Make sense? Okay. So I think this is a different QR code. Sometimes people take pictures. You can have these slides. Either I think you can get them through this. I'll give you my email, LinkedIn at the end. Email me. You'll absolutely have everything we have here. So this is the part where, I invite you to grab a piece of paper or write on your device, but actually do this yourself. This is where we find that, that 14% increase in the quarter. So the first, and there's a bunch of principles here, and we'll come back and look at them. And the first is that business strategy drives, right? It's not a tech strategy, it's not your tech outcome, it's your business strategy. So this is like the warm-up, right? This is the easy one. Just for yourself, and we'll come to you here, Jacob and Mike, what areas of the business do you think about in terms of harnessing data for business improvement? Yeah. If you had this ability to harness that information, where would you put it? Some work we did with Concordia with their engineering, a bit of an eye test here, but they said that it's the obvious places. It's it's progress monitoring, it's change management, it's resource utilization, right? Here's some areas. And then to the conversation we're having here this morning, I think about it in terms of the galaxies, right? You have your field, you have your finance, you have your operations. These are kind of the big galaxies that need to work together. And that, you know, I'm a top-down guy, bottom-up, but where in your business do you think about improvement?
For us, it was a lot of the project management.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot. It's the, you know, as a general contractor, you're really doing a lot of management, managing your subs, managing the project, and trying to do that in a more streamlined manner to save a lot of time.
Our business is a demolition and environmental company. So for us, it was getting the productivities and data from the field back to our estimating department and ensuring that the goals that we're putting out there to achieve the profits that we want to hit, that can actually be met. So that has been the great success for us, is gathering that data from the field and ensuring that our estimators are actually, you know, estimating the work to ensure that the guys in the field and women can hit the targets that we're putting out there. Because before we were working blind, we were setting targets, and then at the end of the job, we'd be like, you know, we've lost profits on these projects. We haven't hit the margins, and this has allowed us to pull back the jobs and go through it fine tooth and comb and see where every dollar on the project was spent and where we lost money and where maybe we didn't carry enough for our productivities, or maybe where we carried too much, right? So it really allowed us to strip back the projects and look at the data and see where our dollars and cents were going.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And the work we do working with construction companies, this is our playing field, right? We'll start in finance, and then you need information from here, right? There's these centers of truth. Okay, so everybody feel warm? We're kind of warmed up. The next piece is our problems, right? We spent a bit of time looking at the quagmire of those very acute issues, whether it's the inefficiency of data entry, not getting visibility, you know, specific to those areas of business focus. Where are the problems that you see today? And I'd invite you to list them down, right? So, you know, here they are again. What are the problems you see in your organization? Jacob? Well, Jacob, I know your answer already, right? But do you want to speak to them a little bit?
Like, one of the major problems that kind of started the whole thing for us was, like I said, project management was one of the main areas we wanted to improve, streamline. So you go out and you buy a project management software. For example, us was Autodesk Construction Cloud. And then you have this huge, powerful software, but how do we use it, like you were saying, like really using the technology the right way? And, you know, trying to develop processes to streamline it so everybody's doing it the same way, using it to its full potential, and pulling the right data out of it afterwards, like you were saying, to you know, figure out how much you did spend, where you can improve, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I would say for us, you know, we have great systems. It's actually getting the field to get us the information, track the information properly, and then relaying it back to the head office where then we can compile that information. So the data entry aspect and actually gathering the information from the field itself.
Yeah. And so where we're going, and the way we think about it is, you know, our line is love the problem. And this, Jacob didn't put this together. We did from the conversations we've had. So he saw it for the first time this morning, I think, maybe. But really for us, we think about it as an inventory of opportunities. And if you're familiar with the theory of constraints or lean manufacturing, every problem you eliminate moves the company forward. And that's really the unlock that we're building on here. So with that, hopefully you've picked a couple, or at least one, because now you got to pick one. What's your favorite problem that you want to work on? Jacob, have you got one in here that you're thinking about?
Mine is the top one on that list, standard operating procedures. For me, that's I think why it's the number one on the list, because the first one we're working on is really everything starts at the top. You start by doing everything properly. You get your standard operating procedures together, and then you try and grow from there, is how I envision
How you think about it.
process
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah. It's logical. Yeah, I picked my word correct, appropriately there. And you'll see why, because now we're going to start to unpack these problems, right? So has everybody picked a problem? Just nod for me. Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right, so you know what your problems are, and as Jacob's talked about, and Mike, you know where you want to go, right? You know what it looks like when that problem's not there anymore. And we think about it from a standpoint of where you are to where you want to be, and what's your map to get there. The concept that I'll share with you that we use is this idea of elevation, data elevation. It's taking the data that you have today that's probably costing you money and starting to harness it to power a piece of your organization and elevating it from raw to potential and kinetic energy. And this will be the most technical part of the presentation, but I think for those that are not deep into technology, this is a really good framing to understand the work that needs to be done. So when you think about elevating data, there's kind of three pieces. There's the technology, there's the flow of where it needs to get to, and then there's the job it needs to do when it gets there. And so Jacob talked a lot about technology and getting that right? So getting it optimized, making sure that you have access to that information, that data that's in that technology, and is the plumbing in place correctly, is the parallel. Then, the piece that was the highest in terms of pain right now was data entry. And so we think about that in terms of data flow. Where does it need to go to start to unlock that trapped data? What does it need to combine with to give you the information you're looking for? What jobs do you need are being done on that data to get the information you need, whether it's pricing of change orders, a decompiling of the information that comes in the time card in terms of shift extras and all sorts of different information that's packed into that. There's all sorts of work that happens in this flow piece that can really start to accelerate the business processes. And then the highest value is when you get up into that information providing insight to somebody who needs to make a decision. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. And so anytime we're working with a client, we think about these three tiers, and even if they're not, we try to get up into the higher, the elevated areas, right? Where does this information start to really make an impact? And you'll see why here in a second. So the shorthand for this, it's in the name IT, right? The I comes before the T. It's about information, not technology. All right, see you. Okay, so we know where we want to go, and now the question is it worth it? All right, so everybody loves ROIs, right? ROI, yeah? Yeah, we believe them, those vendors. Okay, we'll take a different approach, and obviously understanding if something is worth it is a valuable exercise. Here's a way to demystify it. And it sounds glib until we dive into it, but there's really only three ways to get value from data. And we had a lot of conversation around robotics. Robotics is not IT, it's a different type of technology, right? It's a different type of T. And it's replacing human labor. When we talk about IT, it's about the information. And so there's really three ways that you can extract business value from that information. You make it cheaper, you make it faster, or you make it better. All right? Now, as I said, it sounds glib when I say it, but if we look a little deeper, cheaper, less hands on keyboard, right? Less time doing the low-valued work to get that to where it needs to go. So for those that are thinking about problems related to the cheaper, I'd invite you or ask you right now to say, how many hours per week would you be eliminating in terms of low-value work? All right, so come up with a number. We've seen everything from a couple of hours to multiple people, multiple days, right? Yeah, all week, every week, right? Faster. What are the important business processes that would have value if they were faster? And in this, somebody said this to me, I borrowed it, kind of stole it from my own, but in construction, the project is the managerial unit, right? It's what actually makes construction different makes it harder to put technology in, is that essentially it's like a conglomerate with all these P&Ls. So if you could get, your WIP done faster, or invoicing faster, or pricing, or time cards, or what have you, what is that worth per project per week? Right? If it's 0, you don't do it. You just live with it, right? But generally, this is going to be something. Is it $10? Is it $100? Is it $1,000? What's that worth? And then better, similarly, is something you don't have today. Either it's information you don't have, or information you don't trust, or it's something that we've worked with a lot of clients, especially in California, that have compliance issues. They did like real serious compliance regulations that they need to have information on breaks and lunches and whatnot. And so for them, it's the once every 3 years when they're audited, they need to have that information available, or it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that falls into the better. So any reactions to this? Does this make sense as people put some numbers together? Yeah? Any questions coming from the audience? Is this valuable? Yeah. Okay, so I'm hoping you played along. We'll get into the weeds here a little bit, but and we will have a worksheet as part of that handout that we have here. But essentially, Jacob, have you been tracking your numbers?
Yep.
Okay. Here, inside of your estimate, if you have a number of hours per week saved, it would go in that row A. If you have a dollars per project per week, it would go in row B. And then row C is the better insight. And I'm gonna do a for example here in a second to give people time to do their numbers. Maybe I should explain a little more. Obviously, you can do the math yourselves. I also did a shortcut on each of them. So take your hours by 2,000. That's a rate of $40 per hour, 50 hours per week. So just to make the math really easy. So pretty simple across the board. It's just a math exercise. What's valuable about doing this is not me convincing you or a vendor convincing you. It's you convincing you so that you can align your organization around it. And that's obviously there's a lot of, we say this, there is stress and anxiety around construction tech. That 2 steps back, wanting to move forward 2 steps back. And so if you can get alignment around why something matters, your number's not going to be right, but you'll get the organization on board. That's the point of this concept of I didn't mention it, the impact horizon. So I said here 4 hours. If something ran, if I could get my invoicing out a day early, it's probably worth $25. Right? It's like I'm going purposely pretty low here, and a piece of information that on where projects are at, taking that flying blind. I think Mike, you said that if you can start to have a bit better visibility, I think there's value there. Make sense? So this is where small numbers start getting a little crazy, right? So 4 hours a week for the year is about $8,000 of impact. 25 per project, if you're running 20 projects, is $25,000. And then 50,000. So I was sandbagging when I said walk out with 20,000. Because I think that these numbers are all available to any of the construction organizations in the room today. Any reactions, guys?
I
it's kind of something I've thought about before, but it's seeing the numbers is cool. But it is like, you don't think about it a lot. You know, you think about the labor side, your labor rates and all that, but thinking about the management side and how much time you can save in the office, running multiple projects at a time and being able to execute that, obviously.
Yeah.
Huge savings there.
The numbers are surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As they say, time is money.
Yeah.
Right? And especially in our business, we always wish we had more time, right?
Yeah,
And more
yeah.
money. So,
Yeah.
Well, not only that too, then, you know, if you have somebody, you're saving that much money, but you're also using that much more potential out of your employees, out of yourself, out of the management, right?
Yeah.
And doing more work,
yeah.
so, which might even cause even more money.
Yeah. Feel free if there's any questions or comments. The anonymous, that was me. I knew my number already. Got 9,000, 5,000. If you have if you want to share, those numbers are surprisingly low to me. If we saw that, we'd say don't do it. All right, don't just live with the problem, and that's the benefit of getting, you know, said from chaos to clarity. Part of the exercise here is figuring out which problems you just live with, right? And once you make that switch, then they don't become problems anymore, right? They're just part of the operation. Any questions? All right. So here was the plan. You know, essentially, here's what we did. We said, what's the business strategy? What's the business focus? Right? Where do you want to get better? And Taylor probably gets sick. Taylor's part of my team and heads up our client delivery. I've said it for years. Business strategy drives data strategy, right? And technology is just an enablement of the two. But really what we're talking about is developing your data strategy, like we saw in the Domino's case, a data strategy to support what you want to do with the business. And as business leaders, that's really what our job is what do we want to achieve in our business. So business strategy drives data strategy, business first. Problems are our opportunities. And there's some really good things about problems is you make a problem go away, you're moving the business forward. We got lots of them, and they're never going to stop coming, right? They're just going to get bigger and better and badder. Can you learn to love them? Because they are the inventory of opportunities to keep moving that company forward over the next decade. Information over tech, I over T, that helps you to understand how you get from where you are to where you want to be. And it puts things in the right order, right? As you think about data elevation, what's the information that moves the business? Where does it need to get to? And then how are we capturing it and organizing it? Technology. And then cheaper, faster, better. Once you realize that really there's only a couple of ways to move data from costing you money to making you money, then you can start to get really precise and have really good conversations within your organization on what you should do, right? What initiatives you should drive and where you should take your business. So we said the game plan here was to come into the session to leave with a path to unlock some profit. And hopefully, Jacob looks energized here. And but now, what if you could do that 3 or 4 times a year? Right? What if you start stacking these improvement opportunities one on top of another? And that's essentially what happened in that Domino case study, right? They started growing double digits. They knew where they wanted to take their business, and they were very purposeful, stepwise, and just started compounding. And some pieces around starting to stack up these wins, you may not see $20,000, right? Like that might not even register. But over time it does, right? This is the compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. But you're also building a culture, right? You're building a culture of moving the business forward, of honoring your employees' time, moving them from lower value to higher value efforts. And so we're building the company to try to help organizations do exactly this, right? And I get really excited about it. So, I love this quote: "An ounce of action is worth a ton of theory." We've thrown a lot of theory here, and maybe you'll leave and say, "Well, that guy was interesting, and we should think about that." And or you take one of your problems and figure out how to unlock the value there. And I think anything I've shown here, we have some methodologies, playbooks. You don't need us to do it, right? You can do this in your organization with the people you have. One thing I did want an idea here that I wanted to share, and I'll just check the time. Oh, we got lots of time. You guys better come up with some questions. As we've thought about this, and I was sharing in the conversations before the session that we've done a lot of data work over 20 years, but we don't really think of ourselves as data technical services. We really think about ourselves more from a business improvement consultancy, right? How do we help organizations? How do we help them get clear on what they want to do, and then help them move along? And in that thinking, I've started to think that maybe there's a department that's missing here. And this is an idea that was probably a backstory here, but somebody mentioned this concept of the head of growth, head of revenue, which is really an intersection of marketing, sales, and technology. And they asked the question to me, what's the missing in construction? And I actually think that there's a function called project information operations. And because I got all this time, I'm just going to start talking. We were at a MEP innovation event down in LA this year, and there was a panel, 3 large contractors, trade contractors, and one of the presidents said, "We had a project go sideways." Right? That in and of itself is not surprising, but one of those projects that really kind of took the company to its knees, and so they got really serious about project information. And it was one of those throwaway lines during the session, but he basically said, "We haven't lost money on a project since." Right? And so as we think about the information to power projects, so this is a people industry, but it's also an information industry. And so people run projects, but informed projects make money. And so I think there's a function at the intersection of operations, finance, and technology that is really designed to basically architect profit expansion. Something I'm pretty excited about, thinking about how we can help Jacob, who right now is thinking about the technology tier in terms of standard operating procedures at the technology level. How can we fast track him into leaning into insight on the operations and then pulling that in together with a finance perspective? Yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is the very brief advertisement. This is the company now. This is what we're doing, right? Project information operations. We come in on demand and essentially act as an extension of your team. That's what we're doing with Graybeck, and we do that at your pace as essentially part of the team to get you to where you're trying to go. We do exactly what we did here today. Clarity, continuous improvement, profit expansion, and it's like an outsourced IT team, but really more focused on these business outcomes anchored in finance and operations, as opposed to technology outcomes like replace my ERP. Those are never fun. We help on the strategy, the planning, and then the implementation. And our premise is, can we help organizations turn $1 into $3? That was the exercise here today. That's sitting out there for all of you, whether you work with us or not. That as you start doing that exercise to look at how you might, the impact of improving the business, those 1 into 3 are there. And once you turn on that sort of a alchemy machine, are you ever going to turn it off? And that's the premise that we're really driving towards. So with that, that's the end of the scheduled slides. That's me, Chris at ADO. I'm doing a lot of writing on LinkedIn these days, but if you want to grab the slides or some material, you can do that, or if you just hit me with an email, I'll send it to you as well. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
Is there any relation with the project size? Like I saw the number of projects, but I didn't see relation with the project size.
In the math? Okay, so the question is there a relation to the size of the project? Yes, but that's sort of, so let me think through my words here. So if you have a large project, the potential impact on a weekly basis can be more significant, right? So that's sort of, we leave that more to the, if you think about the art and science of leadership, that's the, is something worth it? That we leave to our trailblazers, our leaders, to really think through, yeah, this will matter to the company. But it's a great question, right? It's a
There is different kind of operation, like companies working on small projects, or a big company has like 2 big projects, but they are major.
Yeah. So what we see is we tend to work. We got 2 sort of groupings. We tend to work with the mid-size, and I tend to think about in terms of construction volume. I tend to say about 20 to 150. And I'll tell you why in a second. And then we work with some of the megas out there. They tend to have their own technology teams, data teams, all the analytic teams. And so we end up doing more almost prototype work, right? Almost like special forces type exercises. The reason the mid-sized, and I'd love feedback on this, the reason the mid-sized tends to be a bit of a sweet spot is they have grown to a level where the complexity requires technology, right? So we tend to come in when there's been that 2 steps back, right? So, yeah, Grabe.
Like for us, like started using technology, really higher level technology like Autodesk, construction cloud, project management softwares, and really like the mid-sized companies trying to use it properly and really save that time. Great to have kind of, we knew where the problems were and maybe how the solutions could come, but that process of how are we going to get from creating a standard operating procedure for everyone to follow to getting the insights out of the data we're creating to using that data to report on the next project. And another big one, like the silos, which like Taylor talked for a lot, that was one thing we had a lot of was data silos, which was, we're doing something, I'm creating a change order in Excel on a template, and then I'm printing it off, I'm giving it to accounting, and they're adding it into a budget, or whatever type of process you're doing. You're doing the same thing too many times, and how can we, that's the problem. The solution and the process is, how do we just do it once, and then the whole data goes everywhere, gets reported. Bringing that all together is really where the solution kind of comes in.
Yeah. And it can feel pretty daunting
Yeah.
when you're looking at all the moving parts, and that's
You know
the,
what the problem is, and there's a solution
Yeah. Any observations, comments? No, you're good? Thank you. Any other, yeah?
Just to understand your offering, you don't have a platform, you're a consultancy that comes in, creates a bespoke solution, and then could potentially assist IT departments or media departments build that addition to the stack or something like that. Is that?
Yeah, so I think the technical, so we primarily are a consultancy agency coming in and working side by side. We do have a platform that is not something, so technology-enabled service is sort of what we are. We have a Microsoft Azure backend that we leverage for automating data flows and as a project-centric store for insight. I don't lead with that. It'd be funny for me to say, don't think about tech, but buy my tech. But as we start to understand, as we help understand where the company's going, there's generally a piece that is the glue between, field, finance, operations, that we have a component that's been tailored to do that at a project-centric standpoint. So, does that make sense? I'm not trying to be coy here. We just, figuring out what to do first is our approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not selling software.
No. That said, we have about 50 clients on our platform across North America. So that's the, yeah. Yeah, there's a question at the back, or?
So I understand that you try to identify the problems as a consulting agency, but do you recommend platforms that integrate, say, purchasing of QuickBooks and the time system and how we're going to run bin
Yeah.
Like, do you sit and customize for every company to pull all that data in and run matters off?
Yeah. So I'm going to pull those questions apart, and if I don't have it right. So the question is, do we help companies optimize their technology, whether that's using what they have or selecting other stuff? Yeah, we do. It's sort of a fit for purpose. We've done some of that. Yes, absolutely. Our starting point tends to be, what are you trying to do with the pieces you have right now, right? Like those are somewhat separate, and essentially there's sort of a silver bullet mentality. What we have isn't working, so we got to get the next thing, and that tends to go sideways, right? It can go a lot better once the SOPs are in place, once you're getting business value out of the components that are in place. And I don't want to come across like a non-tech guy. I've slammed a lot of tech into a lot of places, and we were talking about learning. There's the winning team, and then there's the learning team, and I've done a lot of learning, right? So it's a little bit start where you are, and then you're in a better foundation to move forward. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah.
I see the business case, if you're in a growth phase, kind of like Mike is, or you're rolling out a new technology like Jacob is, you come in, but if we're looking at, in this context, exclusively a smaller organization, which I call it 10, 20 people in the office.
Yeah.
At what point does, from the onset of an initiative like this, do you then reach a point where the returns from this undertaking are just marginal gains, and basically say, okay, we're not growing the business anymore, we're not rolling out new technologies, we're going to pump the brakes on this because the return is very little.
Yeah.
What do you see your experience with your clients
Yeah.
in that smaller business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've gone with some of smaller, and so the industry standard in construction for IT spend is about 2%. Right, so that's kind of the number that is the standard. It's not necessarily the right number, and if you look at the Domino's story, right? If you think about it in terms of a percentage of your revenue that's being invested in technology, the bigger that piece is, the more you need to know what you're doing, right? Like that's I guess what I'm trying to say is, you don't want to spend a disproportionate amount of your technology spend without understanding the clear ramifications. So as we get into smaller companies, the margin for error gets smaller, right? Is the point. So your question was, does it make sense at a smaller scale? Maybe. And I might be saying there's a point where we had a client that was on the small scale, and I did the math to see what he was spending, and had a conversation with him saying, we can't be doing, like, if we're going to do something, it has to be impactful because you're spending too much, right? You're spending too much of a proportion of your revenue on, frankly, stuff that was down in the technology tier. So, in terms of our business model, we try to make it really easy to work with. We try to be really easy to work with in that we say on demand and we mean on demand, right? So and we have our plans are basically walk, jog, run, and sometimes we'll have concurrent plans, but we basically operate at the client's pace. And I see Jacob nod, he knows this, and if for some reason they want to pause, we pause, right? And our model is basically, if we can create those values that if we can create the business value by harnessing the data, we have a good sized portfolio of forever clients that's growing because they're starting to compound those gains. So it's a bit of a word salad answer there, but at a certain size, a company is probably better off doing it in-house with Excel and with the pieces they have. But if they take some of these principles, then they'll be in better shape as they start to swap pieces out for the enterprise-grade tech, and whether they build capacity internally or work with a partner like us, they're better off for any of those paths. Did I answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah? And one thing, and we're getting pretty close to the end here, one thing I just want to leave everybody with is you don't need ADO to do this. And in fact, we're these methodologies, we want to give them away. We're pretty close to capacity right now. We have the ability to continue to grow our roster, but what we want to do is we want to work with clients that are really kind of buying into this vision and driving it, right? That are really we're playing pitch and catch, and we're doing something strategic and special, and those are fun. Those are a lot of fun. And when companies aren't at that level, we want them to succeed as well, right? If we can help them kind of understand these principles and start to take the small bites internally. So I didn't put it in here, but Taylor's about to launch a monthly workshop, taking real scenarios and kind of playing it out. So we can start to kind of rein in this technology monster in the industry, right? So that's, we don't need everybody to be our clients. But we also know that something special can happen here. All right, we're coming in close. I want to thank everybody. That was a great questions. Yeah, one more here.
How do we sign up or find out about Taylor's workshops?
If you go to that, if you reach out to us either through that form that was at the end or me directly, I'm sure you'll end up on one of our lists, and we'll make sure that you have that information. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.